Wondering how customers who, over the years, at a lot of your chains have become so used to the value orientation of the offerings are adjusting if prices are going up across the board. Of course, we did have, Brian Niccol of Chipotle saying they have an $8 chicken burrito. There's no resistance to people paying that. Is that something that you feel as if is giving you headroom in terms of pricing, or do you feel pressure to maintain that very low price point?
Look, our industry was founded on the idea of great tasting food and convenience and value. And Yum's scale and our innovative teams obviously are hitting on all cylinders when it comes to all three of those dimensions. We are always going to provide great value to consumers. But in this environment, an inflationary environment, we know that we have room to take price. And we have other levers that we can pull in order to manage the pressure on inflation. We've proven all around the world, operating in over 150 countries with very many different environments of inflation, deflation, all sorts of different challenges in every one of those environments. We've proven that our model is resilient and that we can always thrive in any environment. So we're confident as we move forward that we will be able to continue to have the kind of margins and profitability that we've demonstrated in the last few years, which is so critical because you don't get those 4,000 gross new units being built by franchisees with their franchise, their capital, unless you've got the right kind of business model for them, and we do.
It's interesting. The market is so hoping for a rollover in food inflation, but I've seen a lot of analysis on just say, for example, farming inputs, the five-fold increase in the price of fertilizer, that's going to make a rollover in food inflation a little more difficult maybe than some think. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's no doubt we're operating in an inflationary environment, but let's remember that's mostly in the U.S. for us right now. 2/3 of our restaurants are outside the U.S., and that's a very different environment, and that's where a lot of our growth is occurring. But in the U.S., we're dealing with inflationary pressures. We're dealing with supply chain pressures. The labor component, which we haven't talked about, is obviously a challenge. We've come out of some of the challenges of Omicron. We feel better about that as we move forward. But again, we've been fairly cautious when it comes to pricing in the past, making sure we're always the value leader in all the categories we compete in. We believe we can continue to maintain that kind of leadership. But still adjust our model to make sure our profitability is there.
That's exactly where I was going with you, David, the labor component. How are you navigating that right now? And as you do make all these technology investments, how does that change or perhaps offset some of the pressures there over the longer term?
Yeah, well, the technology investments are obviously a win-win all around for consumers and for our franchisees and employees. As we make it easier to process orders, it does actually help on the labor line. It's higher average ticket. We have happier consumers in terms of the ease of which they can order from us. So that is a win-win and part of the equation. I was just on the phone with our chief operating officers yesterday comparing notes about what's going on in the U.S. in terms of labor. And there were some very consistent themes, which is encouraging. Lots of challenges, of course, in Q4 and into the beginning of this year, particularly with Omicron disrupting labor supply. But more recently, we're seeing an uptick in applications, and we really do feel like the worst of at least this latest wave is behind us, which is good news for us because the consumer demand is there. It may not be as high right now as it was last year with stimulus, but there's still plenty of demand. The challenges we had in Q4 and into this year is just being able to meet that demand, keep our restaurants operating the way that we know they should be operating at all times of the day. And we see that situation starting to improve.